What if Darth Vader's mask contained a fragment of his soul? The sterile chamber on Mustafar echoed with the hum of machinery. Darth Vader stood at its center, his imposing figure bathed in the flickering red light of molten lava visible through the fortress's windows. He held his helmet in his gloved hands, its cold, black surface reflecting the faint shimmer of his yellow, corrupted eyes. Vader's breathing was labored, even without the mask. The exertion of his dark side rituals had pushed his ravaged body to its limits. Before him, on an obsidian altar, lay a Sith holocron, its pulsating light casting ominous shadows across the room. He placed the helmet on the altar, his hands trembling slightly, not with fear or hesitation, but with the immense concentration required for what he was about to attempt. The holocron's light grew brighter, and the chamber filled with a low, droning sound as Vader extended his hands over the helmet. "The galaxy will remember me," he intoned, his voice deep and resonant. "Even if I fall, my will shall endure." The Force swirled violently, a storm of dark energy centered on the helmet. Vader closed his eyes, his mind diving deep into the abyss of the Force. He reached into the core of his being, pulling at the very essence of his soul. It was excruciating, like tearing apart flesh and bone, but he did not falter. As the fragment of his soul detached, Vader's knees buckled. He gripped the altar for support, his mechanical breathing now ragged and uneven. The fragment, a shimmering wisp of crimson energy, hovered in the air before slowly seeping into the helmet. The metal seemed to absorb it, glowing faintly before the light faded entirely. "It is done," Vader whispered, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. The helmet now contained a part of him, his essence, his anger, his hatred. It was more than armor. It was a vessel of his will, ensuring that Darth Vader would live on, even if his body were destroyed. Vader lifted the helmet, staring into the empty eye sockets as if gazing into the reflection of his own soul. He placed it on his head, sealing himself in darkness once more. From that moment on, the mask was no longer just a tool for survival. It was a talisman, a relic of Sith power, and a curse upon the galaxy. The cantina on Tanel 5 was dimly lit, its patrons a mix of smugglers, bounty hunters, and traders who thrived on the chaos left behind by the fall of the Empire. Luke Skywalker sat at a corner table, his hood drawn up, nursing a drink he had no intention of finishing. The Force guided his every move, faint whispers leading him across the galaxy. A figure approached, a Rhodian informant that Luke had paid handsomely for information. The alien slid into the seat opposite him, glancing nervously around the room before speaking in a hushed tone. "They say the Dark One leads them," the Rhodian said, his voice barely audible over the clinking of glasses and quiet hum of conversation. "A man in black, like the one from the Empire. They call him Vader." Luke's chest tightened. "Where is he?" The Rhodian hesitated. "Rumors say he's gathered the remnants of the fleet in the Outer Rim, a world called Garel. That's all I know." Luke nodded, sliding a credit chip across the table. The Rhodian snatched it up and disappeared into the crowd. Luke leaned back, his mind racing. Could it be possible? Vader was gone. He had seen it himself, felt it in the Force. But the whispers persisted, growing louder with each passing day. He returned to his X-Wing and set a course for Garel. The journey was quiet, save for R2-D2's occasional chirps of concern. "I know, R2, Luke said, his voice tinged with unease. "I feel it too." When he arrived at Garel, the planet loomed ominously in the viewport. Its surface was dotted with military installations, and orbiting above it were remnants of the Imperial Navy, a fleet cobbled together from surviving star destroyers and smaller cruisers. Luke landed his X-Wing in a secluded canyon, masking his presence in the Force. He moved through the shadows, avoiding patrols as he made his way to the main compound. The whispers guided him to a massive rally. Thousands of troopers in mismatched armor stood in formation, their attention fixed on a raised platform. And there he was. The man in black armor stepped forward, his helmet a replica of Darth Vader's. The crowd roared as he raised a gloved fist, igniting a crimson lightsaber. Luke's breath caught as the Force struck him with an overwhelming sense of familiarity. This was no mere pretender. This man bore the essence of his father, raw power, unyielding darkness. "No," Luke whispered, his voice trembling. "It can't be." The man turned, as if sensing Luke's presence. Their eyes locked, and Luke felt the weight of the dark side pressing down on him. He ignited his lightsaber, but before he could act, blast of fire erupted around him. The crowd surged, and Luke was forced to retreat. He fought his way back to the canyon, deflecting bolts with precision. R2-D2 had already prepped the X-Wing, and as Luke launched into the sky, the man in black watched him go, his helmet tilted in silent contemplation. Back on Chandrila, Luke stood before Leia in her office. Her brow furrowed as he recounted what he had seen. "Vader," she repeated, disbelief etched on her face. "It's not him," Luke said. "But it's something. A fragment, perhaps. And he has an army." Leia's expression hardened. "We can't ignore this. If the remnants of the Empire rally behind him, it could undo everything we've fought for." She contacted Admiral Akbar, who immediately began mobilizing the New Republic Navy. A strike force was assembled, with Luke leading the ground assault. The New Republic fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a hammer, emerging against the backdrop of the Outer Rim planet Garel. At its head was Admiral Akbar's Mon Calamari cruiser, Home 1, its graceful lines belying the devastating firepower it commanded. Around it flew squadrons of X-Wings, Y-Wings, and A-Wings, their pilots ready to carve a path through the remnants of the Imperial fleet. On the Imperial side, an imposing Star Destroyer sat at the heart of the defensive formation, flanked by two smaller Victory-class ships. Waves of TIE fighters poured from their hangars, creating a black cloud of death that surged toward the New Republic forces. Lock S-foils in attack position, Wedge Antilles ordered over comms, his voice calm but resolute. Leading Rogue Squadron, he banked his X-Wing left, dodging a sudden volley of green laser fire. "Snap! Stay on my wing!" A young Temman Snap Wexley, still green but eager, followed Wedge's maneuver with precision. "Right behind you, boss," he called, weaving through the chaos. The starfighters clashed in a dazzling display of agility and firepower. TIE fighters screamed as they swarmed the New Republic ships, their pilots relentless in their defense of Garel. Wedge picked off one TIE after another, his targeting computer lighting up with each confirmed kill. "Rogue 3, on your 6. Snap called out, warning Wedge of an incoming TIE. "I see it," Wedge replied, pulling into a tight corkscrew. The pursuing TIE overshot its mark, and Snap took the opportunity to blast it into oblivion. Meanwhile, Home 1 unleashed a broadside against the lead Star Destroyer. The Imperial ship returned fire, its green turbolasers slamming into the Mon Calamari cruiser's shields. Inside the command center, Admiral Akbar barked orders, his large eyes scanning the battlefield. "Focus fire on their shield generators," he commanded. "We need a path cleared for our bombers." A squadron of Y-Wings, escorted by A-Wings, dove toward the Star Destroyer's underbelly. Dodging a flurry of turbolaser fire, the Y-Wings dropped their payload, the explosions sending ripples through the Imperial ship's shields. But the Empire was far from defeated. The Victory-class Star Destroyers moved into flanking positions, unleashing devastating barrages that forced the New Republic fleet into a defensive formation. Snap's X-wing shook as a stray blast narrowly missed his cockpit. "We're getting pinned down," he yelled, his voice tinged with panic. "Keep it together, Snap," Wedge said, spinning his X-wing into a daring dive. "We're not out of this yet." As the battle raged in space, Luke Skywalker led his ground team toward the heart of the Imperial compound. The throne room was eerily silent, save for the soft hum of the ventilation systems. Luke stepped forward, his lightsaber igniting with a sharp hiss, its green blade casting a glow that danced off the dark walls. The man in black armor stood at the far end of the room, his crimson blade already ignited. The helmet, identical to Darth Vader's, turned slightly as the figure regarded Luke. "You've come to die, Jedi," the man said, his voice distorted through the mask. "You're not him," Luke said, his grip tightening on his hilt. "You'll never be him." The man lunged without warning, his blade slicing through the air in a deadly arc. Luke met the strike with his own, the clash of their sabers sending sparks flying. The two combatants moved with precision, their movements a deadly dance of strength and speed. Luke's training as a Jedi Master was evident in his fluid strikes and measured defense, but the man's raw aggression was overwhelming. "I am Vader reborn," the man shouted, slamming his saber down in a powerful overhead strike. Luke sidestepped, countering with a quick slash that grazed the man's side. "You're nothing but a pawn," Luke said, his voice steady despite the intensity of the battle. The man roared, unleashing a torrent of wild strikes. Luke parried each one, but the ferocity of the attacks forced him back. A quick flourish sent Luke's saber spinning from his hand, and he barely managed to roll away as the man's blade struck the ground where he had been standing. Summoning the Force, Luke pulled his saber back into his hand just in time to block another strike. He shifted his stance, his focus sharpening. The room trembled as their duel reached its peak, each combatant drawing on the Force to enhance their abilities. The man's strikes grew heavier, but Luke began to exploit openings in his wild form. With a precise slash, Luke disarmed the man, sending his saber clattering to the ground. He stepped forward, his blade pointed at the man's throat. With one swift motion, he removed the mask. The face beneath was young, haunted by fear and confusion. "Torin," Luke said, his voice filled with shock. The young man's eyes met Luke's, tears streaming down his face. "I couldn't stop it," he whispered. "The mask. It controlled me." Luke deactivated his saber and knelt beside him. "It's over now," he said gently. "You're free." Torin sat on the ground, trembling as the weight of his actions washed over him. Luke turned to one of the New Republic soldiers who had just entered, his blaster raised cautiously. "Take him to safety," Luke ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Ensure he's treated fairly." He wasn't in control. The soldier nodded. "Yes, Master Skywalker." Two others joined him, carefully helping Torin to his feet and escorting him out of the compound. Luke exhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a moment. Then, as the rumble of explosions and the faint hum of blaster fire echoed through the walls, his determination hardened. There was still a battle to win. Luke's X-wing soared into the chaos above Garel, its engines screaming as it joined the New Republic fleet. The battle in space had reached a fever pitch, the New Republic starfighters locked in a desperate struggle against the remnants of the Imperial Navy. "Red 5, reporting in," Luke said over the comms, his voice calm but firm. "Red 5. Wedge Antilles replied, surprise in his tone. "Luke, you're a sight for sore eyes." The comm channel crackled with Snap Wexley's voice. "The Jedi's here. Oh, they're in trouble now." Luke's arrival didn't go unnoticed. On the Imperial side, panic spread through the ranks as the rebel hero entered the fray. Whispers of his legendary exploits, the destruction of the Death Star, the duel with Vader and Sidious, filled the comm channels of the TIE pilots. "Skywalker's in the fight," one TIE pilot yelled. "Focus on your objectives," an Imperial officer barked back, but the fear was evident in his voice. Luke's X-wing sliced through the Imperial formation like a blade, his precise maneuvers unmatched. His first volley of proton torpedoes struck a TIE bomber squadron attempting to target Home 1, sending fiery debris spiraling into the void. "Nice shot," Wedge called out, banking his X-wing to cover Luke's flank. "Stay tight, Rogue Squadron," Luke instructed. "We can end this." The New Republic fleet capitalized on Luke's arrival. Y-wings began another bombing run on the Star Destroyer's engines, while A-wings weaved through the TIE swarms, taking out stragglers. "Admiral Akbar," Luke said over the tactical channel, "what's the status of their fleet?" Akbar's gravelly voice came through. "Their flagship is heavily damaged, but they're trying to rally. If we press the attack, we can force a surrender, or destroy them." Luke frowned. "Let's give them a chance to surrender. We've spilled enough blood today." As Luke led an assault on the remaining TIE fighters, he sensed an incoming threat through the Force. "Wedge, snap, break formation. Interceptors on our tail." The two X-wings followed his lead, splitting off just as a squadron of TIE interceptors roared into the fray. Luke spun his X-wing in a corkscrew, weaving through their laser fire with ease. He targeted the lead interceptor, firing a quick burst that obliterated it. Wedge and Snap picked off the others, their coordination seamless. "Red 5, we owe you one," Wedge said, a grin audible in his voice. "Let's finish this," Luke replied. The Star Destroyer's shields finally buckled under the combined assault of the New Republic fleet. Fires raged across its surface as escape pods jettisoned. Some of the smaller Imperial ships attempted to flee into hyperspace, but not all succeeded. One of the Imperial captains, faced with no escape and no hope of reinforcement, activated an open channel. "This is Captain Tredan of the Resolute. We surrender. Cease fire." Cheers erupted across the New Republic fleet. Snap hooped over the comms. "We did it." The battlefield quieted as the remaining Imperial ships powered down their weapons, signaling their surrender. Luke brought his X-wing alongside Wedge's. "We've won the battle," Wedge said. "Thanks to you." Luke shook his head. "Not just me. Everyone played their part." As the fleet regrouped, Luke stared out at the debris-strewn space around Garel. The cost of victory weighed heavily on his shoulders, but the New Republic had struck a decisive blow against the remnants of the Empire. Back on his temple world, Luke secured Vader's mask within a heavily fortified vault, layers of protection ensuring it would never be misused again. "I'll keep it safe," he said to himself, his voice resolute. Torin, now free of the mask's influence, stood beside Luke, his expression filled with guilt. "I don't know how I can ever make up for what I've done." "You can," Luke said gently, "by choosing a better path, one step at a time." As Luke walked away, he felt a lingering shadow in the Force. The Sith were gone, but their echoes remained, a reminder that vigilance was always required to protect the light. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.